The Girl Who Chased Away Sorrow. The Diary of Sarah Nita, a Navajo Girl. New Mexico, 1864. Written by Anne Turner. Evil comes 2 times this day. My mother used to say that when evil happens, it is never one thing, but more than one. And that is true this day. For soon after we leave the hogan and rub ashes on our faces to keep away the chindi, for we could not stay there with the body, we hear a warning shout from the lookout on the rim of the canyon. He has spotted soldiers at the mouth of the canyon. Quickly, grandmother rolls up the blankets and ties one to the back of each person in the family. To her son she gives a sack of dried pumpkins and peaches. To grandfather she hands a sack with some bowls and pots, while she gives 2 water gourds to Kaiba and me. Poor aunt is stumbling around in a daze, picking up one pot, then putting it down. Grandfather turns at the door to tell us we are going to the house of the Ancient Ones, and the look on his face frightens me. Outside the wind blows sharp and clean, but there is no sunlight on the floor of the canyon, only a frozen river and drifts of snow. Aunt walks close to grandmother, who keeps tugging on her hand to make her trot. I can see Starlight's head bobbing in the cradleboard against her back. My other aunt asks what will happen to our sheep, but grandfather says we cannot bring them with us. There is not enough time. Our moccasins sink into the snow. Luckily, grandmother gave us leggings a few days ago, so our legs are protected. Holding tight to sister's hand, I look around at my people hurrying beside the river. I touch the white shell necklace around my neck and pray for safety. We climb the canyon wall. Soon we reach the rock wall where the Ancient Ones built their house, halfway up. Grandfather and his son hurry forward, setting up a long notched log against the canyon wall. It just reaches to the dark doorway above, and grandfather is happy that he made it the right length. Lightly, as quickly as a younger man, he puts one moccasin foot on the ladder, pulling himself up the tree trunk. Behind me, Kaiba grips my shoulder and whispers that she does not know if she can climb that. It is too high, too frightening. "We have to," I whisper back. Soon it is my turn. Grandmother has gone ahead, and I can see her feet kicking out as she climbs the last stretch into the doorway. High Jumper helps me set one foot on the ladder. "I can do it," I tell him fiercely, suddenly angry and not afraid. Though the ladder soars up above me, dark and threatening, I pretend it is a horse I am riding, a wild and untamed horse that I can master. So I come to the top of the ladder to find grandfather holding out his arms to me, helping me swing through the doorway. Kaiba is next. I do not cry out when I see her strange face against the wall, peering upward. Only grandfather reaches down so far it frightens me and hauls her up the last way. Then comes Aunt, with her baby strapped to her back, then High Jumper, Partridge Girl, and her mother and father. We are all in a cold, gloomy room made of rock. A pale light comes in the 2 windows, but stays by the ledges. Little drifts of snow lie on the stone floor. I know we cannot make a fire to warm us, for that would alert the soldiers. We must just sit, wrapped in our blankets. To keep the soldiers from finding us, grandfather climbs back down again, and hides the ladder behind some brush on the canyon floor. With a pine branch, he sweeps away all of our footprints in the snow and climbs back up the cliff face, using small toe holds and handholds in the rock. "There!" He swings to the door and sits, breathing loudly on the cold floor. "There! Now let the sons of Dun come and find us if they can." They come like a blue river. Cold. It is so cold in that still room. We hear sounds coming down the canyon, the clop of horses' hooves, shouts, cries, and something jingling. Grandfather sits by the side of the window, watching. He whispers to us that there are many soldiers below, a blue line as long as the river winding through the canyon. His voice is tired, and I know he thinks there are too many for us. In the shadows of the room I watch. Our faces are all smudged from the ashes we smeared on after a half-alive man died. High Jumper's cheek twitches, and he drums his fingers against his leggings. Aunt sits slumped against the wall with her baby in her lap. Grandmother leans forward, straining to see through the window, while Uncle and my other aunt stand against a far wall, their faces lined and tense. We 3 girls huddle in a corner like wild grouse, not making a sound. I imagine the soldiers as fierce hawks diving down out of the sky. They will catch us, maybe even kill us, and there is nothing we can do. Oh, changing woman, hide us from the blue soldiers. Let them ride on through, seeing nothing. I feel like a sheep about to be killed. The soldiers camp below us, making fires and loud noises. From farther down the canyon, we think we can hear other Diné shouting insults at the soldiers. But Grandfather will not let us make a sound. We cannot move until the soldiers go. The light by the window gets grayer and grayer, until finally it is black. When it is dark, Grandmother touches us silently, drawing us into the center of the room, where she hands around some dried cornmeal. I am too frightened to eat, though I hear munching and chewing sounds in the darkness. Kaiba and I wrap up in our sheepskins, and the others make rustling sounds as they lie down on the hard, cold floor. I am grateful for our thick and smelly sheepskins, pressing my nose into the wool, sniffing that safe animal smell. I try to keep calm. But fear races inside my body like cold water. I cannot stop it. I can't be brave the way my mother wanted me to be. The soldiers chop down our peach trees. The next morning, when the light is a cold gray, Grandfather kneels by the window. Suddenly, his head snaps back, and he whispers, "They've captured our people and herded them together." After a long moment, we hear a new sound outside, the dull thump of metal against wood. Again and again it comes until something creaks and falls to the ground. "Chindi Dago! Curse them to no goodness!" Grandmother hisses, watching by the window. "They're chopping down our peach trees for their fires!" Grandfather's hand tightens on his knees, until the cords in his fingers stand out. To me, he seems like a lean old puma, lying on a branch. If he could, he would jump on those soldiers below and rake them with his claws. But the terrible thing is, High Jumper does it for him. Without our seeing him, he has grabbed his father's weapons, knelt silently by the other window, and loosed an arrow. "Foolish boy!" Grandfather dashes the bow to the ground, pulling High Jumper away from the window. But it is too late. Now they know where we are, and bullets ping off the rock walls. There are so many bullets being fired it sounds like fat sizzling in a fire. All of us lie flat on the floor, hands over our heads. Aunt whimpers quietly nearby while her baby cries. But Aunt does not try to quiet Starlight, for it is no use now. I pull the sheepskins over my head and Kaiba's. Then, after a terrible, noisy time, silence comes. Someone begins to speak outside. We raise our heads, daring to look up now that the bullets have stopped. Grandfather keeps frowning at High Jumper, but I smile at him, a small smile. For though he was foolish, he was also brave, and did not want to be caught without fighting. I know how he feels. The Nakai tells us to surrender. Words keep coming through the window, like birds darting into the room. At first, none of us can understand them, but my aunt, Mexican woman, suddenly sits upright, listening. As the words continue, she stands and goes near the window, cupping her hand to one ear. It sounds like our language, but different. Aunt tells us that the Mexican, the Nakai, is speaking Navajo, but badly. He says we must surrender, that there are too many soldiers for us to fight. He tells us the soldiers have rounded up more Diné from deeper in the canyon. Aunt makes a sour face. He says they are our friends, and will take us to their fort and feed us. They know we are starving. The words stop for a moment, then go on. Beef. I can understand that. I think because it is a Mexican speaking our language, the words sounded strange at first. You will all have corn and other good things to eat, he says. In the silence, High Jumper says that if the white men hadn't burned our fields, we wouldn't be starving now. The Bilagana are lying to us, and we should never surrender. But his father disagrees. Without food, how can we survive the long cold time? Kaiba whispers that beef would taste so good. I am too afraid to think about food. Silently, grandfather looks around the room. He seems to be counting us, to be adding up something inside. Then he calls out the window that we will surrender, that we want no more fighting. When High Jumper makes a fierce face, grandfather hushes him with a quick downward motion of his hand. Gather your blankets, whatever you need to take with you. We are going with the soldiers, he says. Better this journey than the road to starvation. Wife, I will climb down first to set up the ladder. Then the rest of you follow. High Jumper refuses to leave. One by one, we leave that cold, dark room and scramble down the ladder. When it is my turn, I peer out the window first. Below is a crowd of ragged Dene by the frozen river, with many mounted blue soldiers guarding them. Taking a deep breath, I back out the doorway and climb the notched tree trunk to the ground. Kaiba holds out her hand to me, and I take it. Only High Jumper does not join us. Grandfather calls out to him, as does grandmother, and his mother and father. To each plea he spits back that he would rather die here in the Dinata, that white men cannot be trusted, not ever. When one of the soldiers, a man with a red beard and a red face, raises his rifle, I yell, "No, wait, wait!" Aunt shouts to the Nakai to tell the soldier not to shoot. The Mexican man is a small, wrinkled creature with skinny hair. I don't like his eyes or his pointy chin, but he speaks to the soldier with the strange red hair on his face, who lowers his rifle. Grandmother calls that soldier Hot Face, because it looks like his face is on fire. Then I shout up to High Jumper that he promised to protect me, that he is my friend, like a brother to me. It is all I can think of to persuade him. We wait for a moment, and his face appears at the window. Glancing down at me and back at the room, he slowly climbs out the doorway. "Thank you, Serenita." Grandmother grips my shoulder. "Thank you." And when he is on the ground, he comes straight to me. In the middle of this terrible time, in the middle of the blue soldiers mounted on their huge, sweaty horses, my friend is beside me. The long journey begins. Grandmother tells me that this is the worst part of her story. Once the blue soldiers captured them in the canyon and marched them off to Fort Defiance. Then came the hardest time for all Dene. This was the beginning of the long walk. I put some soft cloth in her lap so she can wipe her eyes from time to time, and there is a gourd of water beside her to refresh her lips. I am afraid of her getting too tired, but I think her anger gives her strength. Mean Mouth shouts directions. There are so many men in blue. They make loud cries, their horses stamp, and all the time the Nakai is shouting directions to us. There are more of us Navajos than the white men, but they are stronger. They have horses and guns. First, Hotface shouts something that the Nakai then tells us. "Come in peace. We will take care of you and give you warm clothing and food." Heads stir, as if a wind passed over a grove of trees. Food, blankets, beef come to words. "We will come with you. We cannot live here anymore. We are starving," says one elder with a band of cloth wrapped around his head. Others repeat that they are starving. The Nakai orders us to follow, wheeling his spotted horse around, heading for the canyon mouth. "Make a line all together. You can bring your animals." Kaiba names him Mean Mouth for his tight, skinny lips, and I pull hard on her hand, reminding her that he understands our language and that we must be careful. Partridge Girl holds tightly to my left hand, pressing her head into my side. Mean Mouth tells us that we are going to the place of the soldiers, where we will be protected from our old enemies, the Utes. The white men will help us and feed us, for they can see that we are starving. Now is the time to stop raiding and stealing and become the kind of people that the Great White Father wants us to be. I am so confused and afraid that the words stream over me like smoke. Where are they taking us? Will they kill us along the way? We cannot find Silvercoat. Kaiba calls for our dog, but where is he? Has a soldier stolen him, or did he run away? When my sister darts out to search for Silvercoat, she does not listen to our calls. One soldier dismounts and runs after her, bringing her back to us. When I step forward, fists clenched, grandfather grips my shoulder. But even I can see the soldier is not hurting Kaiba. Gently almost he hands her to us, saying some strange words that sound like, "Roller girl." His grey eyes shine like mica at the bottom of a river as he smiles at sister. But I do not trust him. Mica Eyes, I name him silently. Grabbing her arm, I give her a little shake for frightening me, and a strange sound blasts through the air, making us all jump. The horses prance forward as the soldiers ride beside and in back of us to keep us moving. When I look over my shoulder, the shuffling line of Dene makes me dizzy. My people's faces are weary, lined with cold and hunger. Dressed in torn blankets, some are almost naked and have only a few herd animals ahead of them. When we pass our hogan, grandmother asks permission from Meanmouth to get her herd animals. At a nod, grandfather and High Jumper open the brushwood corral and gather our goats and sheep. We have more animals than most, and I hear grandfather saying we must guard them well, for they might be our food on the journey ahead. Wet snow hits my cheeks as the canyon walls get lower. We are almost at its end. Grandfather casts a worried glance at the skies. Is he afraid as I am? How will Kaiba survive this weather? And what of grandmother, my 2 aunts, and Starlight? I am not so worried about the others. There is only one good thing to take out of this wounded time, and Kaiba knows it too. Sarah Nita, will we see our mother and father at the place of soldiers? I look down at her and say that I don't know, but we will look, and we won't stop looking until we find them. 5 hands of soldiers. When we reach the mouth of the canyon, there are more soldiers waiting there, with heavily loaded mules. I wonder if food is in those packs, and grandmother says she hopes so. She is holding tight to grandfather's hand, helping him move forward. In the time in the rock house, he was fierce and protected us. But now that we are captured, his shoulders sag and his feet move slowly. My sister walks beside me, shaking the snow out of her moccasins from time to time, for the snow comes well over our feet now. I promise that when we stop, I will stuff more dried grass into her moccasins to keep her warm. I have to take care of her. I cannot shuffle or droop or fall behind. Besides, the soldiers might do something terrible to me if I do. Kaiba looks ahead of us and behind, then whispers, "There are 5 hands of soldiers, Sarah Nita." I am afraid she is too tired to think, but she repeats, 5 hands of soldiers, explaining that if she counts on both hands to 10, then she has to do that 5 more times to count all the soldiers, and that there are even more of us. Huddled in our blankets, we march up to the hill, over the snowy land with the wind whistling past. The only sounds are old ones coughing, babies crying, and the bleating of sheep. Soldiers shout at us. They don't like it if we stop. Once we are on the high, brushy country overlooking the canyon, Slim Woman stops to use the bushes. Riding in from the side, a blue soldier shouts at her, holding up his rifle. Is he afraid she might run away? Frightened, she pulls her dress and blanket about her and runs to catch up. "Chindi tago," grandmother hisses, offended. I too want to curse the soldiers. Later, the wind grows stronger, blowing in our faces, and our whole line slows down. I can hear people coughing behind me, and I see an old grandmother wrapped in a brown blanket stop in her tracks, leaning into the wind. A girl tries to urge her forward as a soldier rides up, shouting and waving his rifle. "Chindita go," Kaiba says this time. Finally, the soldiers let us stop to rest, and we collapse on the ground with the snow still falling. They hand out pieces of something white and hard that the Nakai tells us is bread. It does not taste very good, but it fills up my insides. Some of us are wondering where the beef is, but we are too afraid to ask. While we rest, I help Kaiba scrape away the snow and find grass underneath. Shaking it clean, I stuff it into her moccasins. I use the bushes to relieve myself and hope none of the Bilagana will shout at me. High Jumper stands with his back to me, glaring at the soldiers. He is keeping guard, and if a soldier decides to ride at me, he will jump out, like his name, to stop him. Then that strange sound comes again, starting up the march, and we push through the snowy grass and bushes toward the place of the rising sun. So far, we are all keeping up with the soldiers. I am afraid of what will happen if we do not. We get beef. Sometime toward the end of the day, the snow stops. As the light goes, the blue soldiers dismount, hobble their horses, and start fires on the high plateau. Though I am shivering, first I look off in the distance to see if Silvercoat has followed us. "Silvercoat!" I call, and Kaiba shouts, "Silvercoat, come here!" There is no sign of him, and we are too busy to look, for Kaiba and I have to care for our animals, scraping away snow so they can eat the dried grass. None of us can find water nearby. There is only what we have brought with us in our gourds. The pack mules did carry food, for a soldier brings out hunks of raw meat. The Nakai tells us to get in small groups and sit around the fire with a headman, which we do, putting grandmother's rugs beneath us. Grandfather tries to tell the Nakai that we don't have headmen, but Meemouth declares that grandfather will be in charge of us. In our group, besides us, are 2 elders, and I recognize the old woman in a brown blanket who had trouble keeping up. There is a grim-faced man with a thin wife, 2 younger boys, and a girl about my size. The soldier hands my grandmother pieces of beef as big as one hand, which she cooks on sharp sticks over the fire. After she offers a mouthful to the flames and says a prayer, grandmother distributes the cooked beef. I tear into mine like a wolf. While we are eating, we tell each other our names and clans. The other grandmother is called Desba, and she is having trouble eating the meat, for most of her teeth are gone. The other grandfather says how delicious the food is, and how the white people cannot be all bad, for they are giving us such good meat. Uncle thins his lips. He does not believe that. Then a delicious smell floats toward us, something I've never smelled before. The soldiers come around again with some metal cups. Grandfather has one to share with us. We all sip the hot black drink, and it warms my belly. Kaiba's eyes widen. Good! I feel I could march for days just on its smell. Meanmouth says this drink is called kafi. The soldiers can't be all bad, sister, if they give us such good food. Kaiba leans tiredly against me, her head nodding.